The morning sun barely peeked through the thin curtains of the small apartment when 8-year-old Emma heard the familiar sound of whimpering coming from the corner of their living room. She rubbed her eyes and quietly slipped out of the bed she shared with her twin sister Lily, careful not to wake her up. Their old golden retriever Max was lying on his worn blanket, breathing heavily and struggling to lift his head. Emma knelt beside Max and gently stroked his graying fur. The dog that had once been full of energy, chasing tennis balls in the park and greeting them with excited barks after school, now seemed like a shadow of his former self. His once bright eyes were cloudy, and his movements were slow and painful. Emma's heart broke a little more each day watching their beloved companion suffer. "Morning, buddy," she whispered softly, trying to keep her voice steady. Max managed to lift his head just enough to give her hand a weak lick. That small gesture meant everything to Emma, even though she could see the effort it took him. Their mother, Sarah, emerged from the tiny kitchen holding 2 cups of instant coffee. She was already dressed in her work uniform, a simple blue polo shirt and black pants that showed the wear of too many washes. Dark circles under her eyes told the story of another sleepless night spent worrying about bills, about Max, about everything that seemed to be falling apart around them. "How is he this morning?" Sarah asked quietly, though she already knew the answer from Emma's expression. "He's getting worse, Mom," Emma replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "He didn't even try to get up when I came over." Sarah set down her coffee cups and joined Emma beside Max. She ran her hand along his side, feeling how thin he had become despite their efforts to keep him eating. The vet had been clear during their last visit 3 weeks ago. Max needed surgery to remove a large tumor, followed by expensive treatments that could give him a few more good years. The cost was overwhelming, $15,000 that might as well have been $15 million for their family. Lily stirred in bed and opened her eyes to find both her sister and mother crouched beside Max. She quickly joined them, her small hand finding its way to Max's ear, the spot he had always loved having scratched. Even in his weakened state, his tail gave the faintest wag. "Did you call the vet yet, Mom?" Lily asked, though she already suspected the answer. Sarah's shoulders sagged slightly. "Honey, we talked about this. Dr. Martinez wants to help Max, but we just don't have the money for the surgery. Even with the payment plan she offered, we can't afford the monthly payments on top of everything else." The twins exchanged a look that only siblings who had shared everything their entire lives could understand. They had grown up faster than most children their age, understanding concepts like overdue bills and empty refrigerators long before they should have needed to. Their father had left when they were 4, and since then, it had been just the 3 of them against the world, with Max as their constant companion and source of comfort. Their apartment was small but clean, filled with second-hand furniture that Sarah had carefully chosen from thrift stores and garage sales. The girls shared everything, clothes, toys, even dreams. They had learned not to ask for much, understanding instinctively that their mother was doing everything she could just to keep them afloat. Sarah worked 2 jobs to make ends meet. During the day, she cleaned office buildings downtown, scrubbing floors and emptying trash cans while wearing a smile for the business people who barely noticed her existence. In the evenings, she worked at a local diner, serving coffee and pie to late-night customers while her feet ached in shoes that had seen better days. Even with both jobs, there was never quite enough money. The rent took most of her income, leaving little for groceries, utilities, and the countless small expenses that seemed to multiply like weeds. The girls attended the local elementary school, where they qualified for free lunch programs. Their teachers often remarked on how well-behaved and studious they were, never knowing that the twins had made a pact to never cause their mother any additional stress. They did their homework without being asked, helped with household chores, and never complained when dinner was peanut butter sandwiches for the 3rd night in a row. Max had been their one luxury, if you could call him that. Sarah had found him as a puppy at the animal shelter 6 years ago, shortly after their father left. The adoption fee had been their Christmas present that year. No toys, no fancy clothes, just a golden ball of fur that brought more joy than any material possession ever could. Max had been their protector, their playmate, and their source of unconditional love through all the difficult times. Now, watching him struggle to breathe, the weight of their financial situation felt heavier than ever. The twins had overheard their mother on the phone with Dr. Martinez the night before, asking about options, about payment plans, about anything that might help save Max without destroying their family financially. They had heard the tears in her voice when she thought they were asleep. "What if we tried to raise the money ourselves?" Emma asked suddenly, the idea forming as she spoke. Sarah looked at her daughter with a mixture of love and heartbreak. "Sweetie, $15,000 is a lot of money. More than most people make in several months. But people help dogs all the time on the internet," Lily chimed in, remembering stories she had heard at school about crowdfunding campaigns. "Maybe if we told people about Max, they would want to help him too." Sarah wanted to protect her daughters from the disappointment that seemed inevitable, but she also saw the spark of hope in their eyes. The same spark that had been dimming a little more each day as they watched Max decline. She knew that doing nothing would teach them a lesson about giving up, while trying and failing might teach them something about perseverance and the kindness of strangers. The morning routine continued around these heavy thoughts. Sarah made breakfast, toast with butter and jam, a luxury they allowed themselves twice a week. The twins got ready for school, but their movements were slower, more thoughtful than usual. They kept glancing over at Max, who had managed to lift his head and was watching them with those cloudy, but still loving eyes. Before leaving for work, Sarah knelt beside Max one more time. "Hold on, buddy," she whispered. "We're going to figure something out." As the family prepared to face another day, none of them could have imagined that this morning would mark the beginning of something extraordinary. A journey that would test their faith, bring out the best in complete strangers, and ultimately prove that sometimes the most desperate situations can lead to the most amazing outcomes. That afternoon, Emma and Lily walked home from school with unusual determination in their steps. All day long they had been whispering to each other during recess, forming a plan that seemed impossible, but felt necessary. Their 8-year-old minds were working overtime, trying to figure out how to save the dog who had been their constant companion through every happy moment and difficult day. When they arrived home, they found their mother still at her daytime job, which meant they had a few hours to work on their secret mission. Max was in his usual spot, though he managed to lift his head when he heard their familiar voices. The sight of him struggling just to acknowledge their presence strengthened their resolve. "Okay, so how do people ask for money on the internet?" Emma asked, pulling out the old tablet their mother had bought secondhand for their school projects. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor beside her sister, both of them staring at the cracked screen. They had heard classmates talking about people who made videos asking for help, but they had never actually seen how it worked. With careful fingers, Emma navigated to a video platform they sometimes use to watch educational content for homework. "Look at this one." Lily pointed to a video thumbnail showing a family with a sick cat. "It says they needed money for surgery too." They watched several videos learning about crowdfunding websites and social media campaigns. The twins took notes on scrap paper, writing down words they didn't fully understand but knew were important: GoFundMe, viral, shares, and donations. Emma found a website where people could create fundraising campaigns, and they spent nearly an hour just trying to figure out how to set up an account. The process required an adult's email address and bank information, details they didn't have access to. Their excitement began to deflate as they realized how complicated everything seemed. "We need Mom's help," Lily said finally. "But what if she says no? What if she thinks it won't work?" "Then we'll have to convince her," Emma replied with the kind of fierce determination that only comes from loving someone so much that giving up isn't an option. When Sarah returned home that evening, exhausted from 8 hours of cleaning office buildings, she found her daughters sitting at their small kitchen table with papers spread everywhere. Max was lying nearby, and she noticed that the twins had moved his water bowl closer to where he was resting. "What are you two working on?" she asked, setting down her purse and immediately going to check on Max. The twins exchanged a nervous look. They had practiced what they would say, but now that the moment was here, the words felt stuck in their throats. "Mom," Emma began carefully, "we researched how to ask people for help online." Sarah's first instinct was to shut down the idea immediately. She had always been proud of their independence, never wanting to be the kind of person who asked for handouts, but something in her daughter's earnest expressions made her pause. Lily spread out their handwritten notes. "There are websites where people can donate money to help families with sick pets. We found lots of stories about dogs who got better because strangers helped pay for their medicine." "Girls, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but we can't just ask people for money, Sarah said gently, sitting down at the table with them. Why not? Emma asked. We're not asking for money for toys or vacations. We're asking to save Max's life. Isn't that different? Sarah looked over at Max, who seemed to sense he was the topic of conversation. Despite his illness, his tail made a weak attempt to wag when he caught her eye. The love in that simple gesture broke something open inside her chest. What if it doesn't work? Sarah asked. What if nobody cares about our story? Then at least we tried, Lily said quietly. At least we didn't give up without fighting for him. The wisdom in her 8-year-old daughter's words hit Sarah harder than she expected. When had she started teaching her children that asking for help was something to be ashamed of? When had she decided that struggling alone was better than reaching out to a community that might care? That night, after the twins had gone to bed, Sarah sat at the kitchen table with the old tablet and her daughter's research notes. She spent hours reading success stories of pets who had been saved by crowdfunding campaigns, families who had found hope in the generosity of strangers. She also read stories that didn't end happily, campaigns that never reached their goals, families who had put their hearts out there only to be met with silence. The next morning, Sarah made a decision that surprised even herself. Okay, she said over breakfast, causing both twins to look up from their cereal with wide eyes. We'll try it. But we do this together, and we prepare ourselves for any outcome. The excitement that erupted from Emma and Lily was unlike anything Sarah had seen in months. They jumped up from the table and hugged her so tightly that she almost spilled her coffee. Even Max seemed to sense the change in energy, managing to lift his head higher than he had in days. Sarah called in sick to her evening job that day, something she had never done unless one of the twins was genuinely ill. Instead, she spent the afternoon with her daughters learning about crowdfunding platforms and social media strategies. They discovered that the most successful campaigns had compelling photos, detailed stories, and regular updates that kept supporters engaged. The process of creating their campaign page was both exciting and terrifying. They had to write about their financial situation, admit publicly that they couldn't afford to save their dog without help. For Sarah, who had spent years maintaining the appearance that everything was fine, this level of vulnerability felt overwhelming. Emma insisted on writing the first draft of their story. Her 8-year-old honesty cut straight to the heart of their situation. Our dog Max is very sick, and we don't have enough money to make him better. He has been our best friend since we were little, and he loves us even when we're sad. We are asking nice people to help us save Max because we love him, and he loves us back. Lily contributed by taking photos of Max with their mother's old phone. Some pictures showed him in happier times, playing in the park or sleeping curled up between the twins. Others showed his current condition, the reality of his illness that they hoped would motivate people to help. Sarah refined their story, adding details about the veterinary diagnosis and treatment costs while keeping the tone honest and hopeful. She included their family story, not as a sob story, but as context for why this dog meant so much to them and why they couldn't handle the financial burden alone. By evening, their campaign page was live on the internet. The twins stared at the screen showing $0 raised and 0 shares, but their eyes were bright with possibility. Now what? Lily asked. Now we wait, Sarah said. And we hope that somewhere out there, people will care about Max as much as we do. None of them slept well that night, checking the campaign page every few hours on Sarah's phone. The counter remained stubbornly at 0, but their determination remained strong. They had taken the first step into unknown territory, armed with nothing but love for their dog and faith that kindness still existed in the world. For 3 days, their fundraising page sat in digital silence. Sarah checked it obsessively during her breaks at work, while the twins looked at it every morning before school and every afternoon when they returned home. The counter remained frozen at $0, 0 shares, 0 comments. Max's condition continued to worsen, and the weight of their failure began to settle over the family like a heavy blanket. On the 4th day, Emma made a decision that would change everything. During lunch at school, she approached Mrs. Rodriguez, her favorite teacher, with their tablet clutched in her small hands. Mrs. Rodriguez, can you help me share something important? Emma asked, her voice trembling slightly with nervousness. Mrs. Rodriguez, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a genuine love for her students, immediately gave Emma her full attention. She had noticed that both twins had been quieter than usual lately, and she had been concerned about them. Emma explained their situation with the straightforward honesty that only children possess. She showed Mrs. Rodriguez their fundraising page, their photos of Max, and their simple but heartfelt plea for help. As she spoke, other students began to gather around, drawn by the emotion in Emma's voice. Mrs. Rodriguez felt her heart break as she listened to this 8-year-old girl describe watching her beloved pet suffer while feeling completely helpless. She looked at the campaign page and immediately understood why it hadn't gained traction. It was buried in the vast ocean of the internet, invisible to anyone who didn't already know to look for it. Emma, honey, would it be okay if I shared this with some people I know? Mrs. Rodriguez asked gently. Emma's face lit up with the first real hope she had felt in days. Really, you would do that? Mrs. Rodriguez shared the campaign page on her personal social media accounts that afternoon, writing a heartfelt post about her students' love for their family dog. She tagged several of her friends and asked them to share it with their networks. She also posted it in local community groups and pet lover forums, anywhere she thought people might care about a family trying to save their beloved companion. The response began slowly. Mrs. Rodriguez's sister donated $25. A colleague from school contributed $50. A few friends shared the post to their own social media accounts, expanding the circle of people who knew about Max's story. When Sarah checked the campaign page during her dinner break that evening, she nearly dropped her phone. The counter showed $180 raised from 12 different donors. It wasn't much compared to their $15,000 goal, but it represented something she had never experienced before. Strangers caring enough about their situation to offer help. The twins were ecstatic when their mother showed them the page that night. They read each comment left by donors, messages of support and encouragement from people they had never met. One woman wrote, "Our old golden retriever was like a family member too, sending love and prayers for Max." A man had donated $50 with the message, "From one pet parent to another, don't give up." Emma and Lily insisted on writing thank you messages to every donor. Even though the platform didn't require it, they crafted careful responses on their tablet, their mother helping them with spelling and grammar. Each message was personal and heartfelt, expressing their genuine gratitude for the kindness of strangers. The momentum continued to build slowly over the next few days. Mrs. Rodriguez had asked her principal if she could send a note home to parents about the campaign, explaining that one of their students was facing a family crisis. The principal, moved by the story and impressed by the twins' initiative, approved the request. Sarah received a phone call at work 2 days later that she would never forget. It was from a local television news station. Somehow their story had reached a reporter who specialized in human interest stories, and she wanted to interview the family about their fundraising efforts. "We don't usually do this," Sarah told the twins that evening. "But maybe if more people know about Max, more people will want to help him." The news crew arrived at their apartment the following afternoon. Sarah had used her lunch break to clean the already spotless apartment and had convinced Max to lie on his favorite blanket in the living room, where the light was best. The twins wore their nicest school clothes and had practiced what they wanted to say. The reporter, a woman named Jennifer Martinez, who was known for her compassionate coverage of local stories, immediately connected with the family. She could see the genuine love between the twins and their dog, the quiet dignity of their mother who was working so hard to provide for her children, and the devastating reality of Max's declining health. The interview was emotional. Emma and Lily spoke about how Max had been their constant companion, their source of comfort during difficult times. They talked about waking up worried about him every morning and going to bed sad that they couldn't take away his pain. Sarah explained their financial situation with honest vulnerability, describing how she worked 2 jobs but still couldn't afford the surgery that could save Max's life. "What would you want to tell people who might be watching this?" Jennifer asked the twins. Lily looked directly into the camera with the fierce intensity that only an 8-year-old fighting for someone she loves can possess. "Max is the best dog in the whole world, and he doesn't deserve to be sick. If you have extra money and you love dogs, please help us save him. We promise to take really good care of him if he gets better." Emma added, "Even if you can't give us money, maybe you could share our story with your friends. Sometimes people want to help, but they don't know who needs help." The news segment aired during the evening broadcast 2 days later. Sarah had arranged to leave work early so she could watch it with the twins. They sat on their old couch with Max lying across all three of their laps, his weight a comforting reminder of what they were fighting for. Watching themselves on television was surreal and emotional. The reporter had crafted their story beautifully, highlighting the twins' maturity and love for their dog, their mother's dedication to her family, and the community support that was already beginning to build around their campaign. The impact was immediate and overwhelming. Within an hour of the broadcast ending, their fundraising page had jumped to over $2,000. Sarah's phone began ringing with calls from people who wanted to help, local businesses offering donations and other families sharing their own stories of beloved pets. By the next morning, they had raised $4,500. The twins could barely contain their excitement as they watched the numbers climb throughout the day. Comments poured in from across the country. People who had seen the news story shared on social media, pet lovers who understood the depth of their bond with Max, and families who remembered their own desperate attempts to save a beloved animal. One comment particularly moved Sarah. "I lost my golden retriever last year to cancer, and I would have given anything to have the chance you have to save Max. This donation is in memory of my sweet girl, Daisy, and in hope for your boy Max." The money kept coming. But more importantly, the love and support from strangers across the country gave the family something they hadn't felt in months: hope. Max seemed to sense the change in energy around him. Though he was still very ill, he began lifting his head more often and even managed to eat a little more each day. For the first time since receiving Max's diagnosis, Sarah began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they might actually be able to save him. The week following the news broadcast brought changes that none of them could have anticipated. Their fundraising page had become a focal point for an outpouring of compassion that seemed to grow stronger each day. By Friday morning, they had raised over $8,000, more than halfway to their goal. But the most surprising development came in the form of a phone call that Sarah received while she was cleaning offices downtown. The voice on the other end belonged to Dr. Rebecca Martinez, Max's veterinarian, but her tone was different from their previous conversations, excited and hopeful rather than gently discouraging. "Sarah, I've been following your family's campaign online, and I have some news that might change everything," Dr. Martinez said. "I showed Max's case to a colleague of mine, Dr. James Wilson, who runs a veterinary oncology center about 2 hours away. He's offering to perform the surgery at cost, just the price of materials and anesthesia, if we can get Max to his facility." Sarah had to sit down on a nearby chair, her legs suddenly feeling weak. "What does that mean exactly? Instead of $15,000, we're talking about roughly $3,000 total. Your campaign has already raised enough to cover the surgery and the follow-up treatments Max will need." The phone call that followed was a blur of medical details and logistics. Dr. Wilson specialized in the exact type of tumor that was affecting Max, and he had seen the news story about their family's fundraising efforts. He had been moved by the twins' determination to save their dog and wanted to contribute his expertise to help make it happen. When Sarah arrived home that afternoon, she found Emma and Lily sitting on the floor beside Max, reading him comments from their campaign page as if he could understand every word. They looked up expectantly as she walked through the door, able to sense that something significant had happened. "Girls, sit down," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "We need to talk." The twins immediately assumed the worst. Had the fundraising been shut down somehow? Had they done something wrong? Their faces showed the kind of fear that comes from having learned too young that good things don't always last. "Max is going to have his surgery," Sarah announced, watching as her daughter's expressions transformed from worry to confusion to pure joy in the span of seconds. Emma started crying first, great heaving sobs of relief that she had been holding back for weeks. Lily threw her arms around Max's neck, burying her face in his fur while repeating, "We did it, Max, we did it," over and over again. Even Max seemed to understand that something important was happening, managing to lift his head and give both girls gentle licks. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation and appointment scheduling. Dr. Wilson had agreed to perform the surgery the following Monday, which gave them the weekend to prepare Max and to continue updating their supporters about this incredible development. Sarah posted an update on their campaign page that evening. explaining about Dr. Wilson's generous offer and announcing that Max would finally receive the treatment he needed. The response from their supporters was overwhelming. Hundreds of comments celebrating the news, sharing in their family's joy, and expressing gratitude for being part of Max's journey toward healing. We couldn't have done this without every single person who shared our story, donated money, or sent us encouragement, Sarah wrote in her update. You've taught our family that there are still good people in the world who care about strangers and their pets. We promise to keep you updated on Max's recovery. The twins insisted on making a video message to thank everyone who had helped them. They sat on either side of Max, taking turns speaking directly to the camera about how grateful they were and how excited they felt about Max getting better. We want to thank every person who gave us money. Even if it was just $1, Emma said seriously. And we want to thank everyone who shared our story with their friends. You helped save Max's life, and we will never forget that. Lily added, when Max gets better, we're going to make another video showing him playing and running again. He's going to be so happy. The video received thousands of views within hours of being posted. Comments poured in from people who had been following their story, celebrating this milestone, and expressing continued support for Max's recovery. Saturday morning brought an unexpected visitor to their apartment. Mrs. Rodriguez arrived carrying a large basket filled with homemade treats for the family and a new toy for Max, a soft, plush bone that he could cuddle with during his recovery. I wanted to see Max before his big day, she explained, kneeling down beside the dog who had started all of this by inspiring two little girls to believe in the kindness of strangers. Mrs. Rodriguez had become something of a local celebrity herself for her role in helping the twins get their story noticed. Other teachers had started asking her for advice on how to support students facing family crises, and she had begun developing resources to help other families navigate similar challenges. You three have taught our entire school community something important, she told Sarah, while the twins played gently with Max. You've shown us that asking for help isn't something to be ashamed of, and that people genuinely want to support each other when they know there's a need. Sunday evening, the night before Max's surgery, felt both anxious and hopeful. The twins had prepared a small bag with Max's favorite blanket and toy to take to the veterinary hospital. They had also written letters to Dr. Wilson, thanking him for helping their dog and promising to take excellent care of Max during his recovery. Sarah had arranged to take several days off work, something that would have been financially impossible before their fundraising success. The campaign had not only raised enough money for Max's surgery, but had generated enough additional donations to cover the income she would lose while caring for him during his recovery. The family spent Max's last evening before surgery quietly, together in their living room. The twins read him stories from their favorite books while Sarah gently brushed his fur. Max seemed more alert than he had been in weeks, as if he somehow understood that help was coming. Do you think he knows we saved him? Lily asked softly. I think he knows we love him enough to fight for him, Sarah replied. And I think he knows that tomorrow is going to be the beginning of getting better. Emma reached over and carefully adjusted Max's blanket around him. We're going to take really good care of you. Max, all those nice people who helped us are counting on us to make sure you get healthy again. As they prepared for bed that night, each family member carried with them a mixture of nervousness about the upcoming surgery and gratitude for the journey that had brought them to this point. They had started this process feeling desperate and alone, convinced that they would have to watch their beloved dog suffer because they couldn't afford to help him. Instead, they had discovered a community of strangers who cared enough to transform their desperation into hope, their isolation into connection, and their financial impossibility into a real chance for Max to live a longer, healthier life. The surgery was scheduled for first thing Monday morning, and Dr. Wilson had assured them that Max was a good candidate for the procedure. The tumor was large but operable, and Max's overall health, despite his recent decline, was still strong enough to handle the operation and recovery process. None of them slept deeply that night, but they rested in the knowledge that they had done everything possible to give Max the best chance at survival. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but it would also bring hope in a way that seemed impossible just a few weeks earlier. Monday morning arrived with a mixture of anticipation and fear that had kept the entire family awake since before dawn. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face before she even realized she was crying. The twins jumped up from their chairs and hugged each other, then ran to hug Dr. Wilson, who accepted their gratitude with the warmth of someone who had chosen his profession specifically for moments like these. "Can we see him?" Emma asked, her voice filled with excitement and relief. "He's still pretty groggy from the anesthesia, but yes, you can visit him for a few minutes," Dr. Wilson replied. "He'll be much more himself tomorrow, but I think it would be good for both Max and you girls to see that he's okay." The recovery room was quiet and dimly lit, designed to help animals rest peacefully after surgery. Max was lying on a soft blanket in a large, clean kennel, an IV line running to his front leg and a small bandage covering the surgical site on his side. He looked small and vulnerable, but his breathing was steady and peaceful. When he heard their voices, Max lifted his head slightly and managed a weak tail wag that sent both twins into fresh tears of joy and relief. They were allowed to sit beside his kennel and gently stroke his head while he drifted in and out of sleep, his body finally beginning the process of healing that had seemed impossible just hours earlier. "He looks so much better already," Lily whispered, as if speaking too loudly might disturb Max's recovery. Dr. Wilson explained that the next 24 hours would be critical for monitoring Max's response to the surgery and managing his pain levels. The tumor had been larger than expected, but it had been completely contained and showed no signs of the aggressive spread that would have made his prognosis much worse. "I'm very optimistic about Max's recovery," Dr. Wilson told Sarah as they prepared to leave for the night. "The surgery went exactly as we hoped, and he's responding well to the pain medication. If he continues to improve at this rate, he should make a full recovery and have several more good years with your family." That evening, from their hotel room near the clinic, Sarah posted an update on their fundraising page that she could barely type through her tears of gratitude. The response from their supporters was immediate and overwhelming. Hundreds of comments celebrating Max's successful surgery, expressing relief that he had made it through the operation, and sharing in the family's joy. The twins insisted on making another video message that night. Even though they were exhausted from the emotional roller coaster of the day, they sat side by side on the hotel bed, their faces glowing with happiness as they spoke directly to the camera. "Max's surgery went really, really good," Emma announced with a huge smile. "The doctor said he got all the bad stuff out and Max is going to get completely better." Lily added, "We got to see him after his surgery, and he wagged his tail when he heard our voices. Tomorrow we get to visit him again, and maybe the day after that we can take him home. We want everyone who helped us to know that you saved Max's life today," Emma continued, her 8-year-old voice carrying the weight of profound gratitude. "Because of all of you, our dog is going to be okay. We promise to take the best care of him ever." The video received thousands of views within hours, shared by people who had been following Max's story and wanted to celebrate this milestone with the family who had captured so many hearts. Tuesday brought even better news. When they arrived at the clinic for visiting hours, they found Max sitting up in his kennel, alert and interested in his surroundings. The surgical site was healing well, and he had eaten a small amount of food during the night, his first real meal in several days. "This is exactly what we want to see," Dr. Wilson reported during his examination. "Max is recovering faster than I expected, which suggests his body was really ready to start healing once we removed the tumor." The twins were allowed to take Max for a short, slow walk in the clinic's recovery garden. Watching him move without the obvious pain that had characterized his movements for weeks was almost surreal. He was still weak and moving carefully, but there was something different about his posture, his breathing, his entire presence that spoke of a body that was no longer fighting a losing battle. "Look, Mom," Lily said quietly as they watched Max sniff at some flowers in the garden. "He's curious about things again." It was true. For the first time in weeks, Max was showing interest in his environment, beyond just enduring each moment. He was looking around, processing smells and engaging with the world in ways that had gradually disappeared as his illness progressed. Wednesday morning brought the news they had been hoping for. Max was ready to go home. Dr. Wilson provided detailed instructions for his recovery care, including medication schedules, activity restrictions, and warning signs to watch for. He also scheduled follow-up appointments to monitor Max's healing and check for any signs of cancer recurrence. "I want to see Max again in 2 weeks, then monthly for the next 6 months," Dr. Wilson explained. "The long-term prognosis is very good, but we'll want to stay vigilant during his first year post-surgery." The drive home felt completely different from their anxious journey 3 days earlier. Max rode in the back seat with the twins, more alert and comfortable than he had been in months. He watched the scenery pass by the windows with interest, occasionally lifting his head to look at Emma and Lily, as if to reassure himself that they were really there. When they arrived home, Max walked slowly but steadily into their apartment, heading directly to his favorite corner where his blanket and toys were waiting. He settled down with a contented sigh that spoke of relief at being back in familiar surroundings with the people who loved him most. The twins spent the rest of the day sitting with Max, reading to him and gently petting him while being careful to avoid his surgical site. Sarah watched her daughters with their recovered companion and felt overwhelmed by gratitude for the community of strangers who had made this moment possible. That evening, as they prepared for their first night together as a complete family in nearly 2 months, Sarah reflected on how profoundly their lives had changed, not just because Max was going to recover, but because they had learned something fundamental about the power of community, the importance of asking for help, and the incredible generosity that existed in the world when people understood there was a genuine need. Had borrowed a car from her neighbor for the 2-hour drive to Dr. Wilson's specialty clinic, something that would have been impossible to afford before their fundraising success had given them options they never thought they would have. The twins sat in the back seat with Max lying between them, his head resting on Emma's lap while Lily gently stroked his ears. They had been unusually quiet during the drive, both lost in their own thoughts about what the day would bring. Max seemed to sense the importance of the journey, staying calm and alert despite the unfamiliar situation. Dr. Wilson's clinic was larger and more modern than their regular veterinarian's office, with specialized equipment and a staff that moved with the efficiency of people accustomed to handling complex medical cases. When they arrived, they were greeted by Dr. Wilson himself, a tall man in his 50s with kind eyes and gentle hands that immediately put Max at ease. "So this is the famous Max I've been hearing about," he said, kneeling down to examine the dog who had inspired so many strangers to open their hearts and wallets. "He's beautiful, and I can see why you girls fought so hard to save him." Dr. Wilson spent nearly an hour examining Max thoroughly, explaining each step of the process to the twins in terms they could understand. He showed them x-rays of the tumor, describing how he planned to remove it and what Max's recovery would look like. His confidence and expertise were reassuring, but the reality of what they were about to put Max through was still frightening. "The surgery will take approximately 3 to 4 hours," Dr. Wilson explained to Sarah. "Max will need to stay here for at least 2 days after the operation, so we can monitor his recovery and manage his pain. If everything goes well, you should be able to take him home by Wednesday." The hardest part was saying goodbye to Max before the surgery. The twins had prepared for this moment, but actually leaving him with strangers in an unfamiliar place felt overwhelming. Emma and Lily both hugged him carefully, whispering promises that they would be waiting for him when he woke up. "Be brave, Max," Lily said softly into his ear. "All those people who helped us are thinking about you today," Emma added. "We'll be right here when you're done sleeping, and then we're going to go home and you're going to feel so much better." Max seemed to understand that he was being entrusted to these new people for his own good. He licked both girls' faces and then looked at Sarah with the kind of trust that only comes from years of love and care. Sarah felt her heart break and mend simultaneously as she watched her daughters demonstrate courage that most adults would struggle to find. The waiting room became their home base for the longest day any of them could remember. Sarah had brought books for the twins, snacks, and activities to keep them occupied, but concentration was nearly impossible. Every time a staff member walked through the waiting area, they looked up hopefully for news about Max's surgery. Dr. Wilson had promised to update them every hour, and he kept his word religiously. At 10 o'clock, he reported that the anesthesia had gone. 6 months later, the transformation in Max was nothing short of miraculous. The golden retriever who had once struggled to lift his head was now chasing tennis balls in the park with the enthusiasm of a dog half his age. His fur had regained its shine, his eyes were bright and alert, and his tail seemed to be in constant motion whenever Emma and Lily were around. The follow-up appointments with Dr. Wilson had consistently brought good news. Max's surgical site had healed perfectly. His blood work showed no signs of cancer recurrence, and his overall health was better than it had been in years. Dr. Wilson often used Max as an example for other families facing similar situations, showing them that early intervention and proper treatment could give their pets many more years of healthy, happy life. The twins had kept their promise to document Max's recovery journey. Their social media updates had become a source of joy for thousands of followers who had invested emotionally in Max's story. Videos of him playing fetch, swimming in a local lake, and cuddling with the girls became viral sensations, shared by people who wanted to spread hope about the power of community support and the resilience of animals. Emma had indeed written thank you letters to every single donor, a project that took her 4 months to complete. Each letter was handwritten and personal, often including a photo of Max in his current healthy state. Many recipients wrote back, sharing their own stories of beloved pets and expressing how much joy it brought them to see Max thriving. The family's fundraising campaign had ultimately raised over $12,000, significantly more than needed for Max's surgery and treatment. After covering all medical expenses, they found themselves with surplus funds that presented them with an opportunity they had never expected: the chance to help other families facing similar situations. Sarah, Emma, and Lily decided to establish a small fund to assist other pet owners who couldn't afford emergency veterinary care. They partnered with Dr. Martinez, their local veterinarian, to identify families in their community who were facing impossible choices about their animals' health care. Their first recipient was an elderly man whose cat needed kidney surgery. The twins personally delivered the check to cover the procedure, bringing Max along to meet the grateful owner and his soon-to-be-healed cat. Watching other families experience the same relief and gratitude they had felt became a new source of purpose for all three of them. Mrs. Rodriguez had continued to be a part of their extended family, often stopping by to check on Max and to celebrate the milestones in his recovery. She had incorporated their story into her classroom curriculum, using it to teach her students about community service, perseverance, and the importance of advocating for those who cannot advocate for themselves. Your daughters taught our entire school something important about not giving up when things seem impossible, she told Sarah during one of her visits. We now have students starting their own fundraising campaigns for various causes, and they all reference Emma and Lily's work to save Max as their inspiration. The local television station had followed up on Max's story several times, documenting his recovery and the family's decision to help other pet owners. Their updates had been picked up by national news outlets, turning their story into a symbol of hope and community support that resonated with people across the country. The attention had brought unexpected opportunities. A pet food company had reached out to provide Max with free, high-quality food for the rest of his life. A local business had offered Sarah a better-paying job with more flexible hours. Understanding that her daughter's initiative and her own resilience made her exactly the kind of employee they wanted on their team. Most importantly, the experience had fundamentally changed how the family viewed their place in the world. They no longer felt isolated or ashamed of their financial struggles. Instead, they had learned that vulnerability could lead to connection, that asking for help was often the first step toward being able to help others, and that communities could form around the most unexpected circumstances. The twins had matured in remarkable ways through their experience. They had learned to research complex topics, communicate with adults as equals, and take initiative when they saw a problem that needed solving. Their teachers reported that both girls showed increased confidence in school, better problem-solving skills, and a heightened awareness of social issues in their community. Emma had started a pet care club at school, teaching other students about responsible pet ownership and organizing fundraisers for the local animal shelter. Lily had become passionate about photography, documenting Max's continued recovery and the stories of other animals they helped through their fund. On the 1-year anniversary of Max's surgery, the family organized a celebration that brought together many of the people who had played important roles in their journey. Dr. Wilson drove 2 hours to attend, bringing his own family to meet the dog whose story had inspired him to start offering more pro bono services for families in need. Mrs. Rodriguez came with several of her current students who had heard the story and wanted to meet the famous Max. Dr. Martinez brought her own dogs to play with Max, marveling at how healthy and energetic he had become. Even some of the major donors from their campaign attended, including a woman who had driven from 3 states away because she said following Max's recovery had been the highlight of her year. The celebration took place in the same park where Emma and Lily had once worried they might be taking Max for his final walks. Now they watched him run and play with other dogs, his surgical scar barely visible beneath his thick, healthy coat, his movements showing no signs of the illness that had once threatened to take him away from them. Sarah stood watching her daughters throw tennis balls for Max, surrounded by a community of people who had started as strangers, but had become extended family through their shared investment in one dog's recovery. She thought about how different their lives might have been if the twins had accepted that they couldn't afford to save Max. If they had never found the courage to ask for help from people they didn't know. Instead, they had discovered that the world was full of people waiting for opportunities to show kindness, to be part of something meaningful, to help when they understood there was a genuine need. Their desperate plea to save their dog had become a catalyst for connections and community support that extended far beyond their original goal. Max, now fully recovered and radiating health and happiness, seemed completely unaware that he had become a symbol of hope for thousands of people. He was simply a dog who loved his family, enjoyed playing fetch, and lived each day with the uncomplicated joy that animals teach us to appreciate. As the celebration continued into the evening, with Max greeting each guest as if they were long-lost friends, Emma and Lily reflected on what they had learned from their journey. They had started with a simple goal: save their dog's life. They had ended up discovering something much more profound about the power of community, the importance of never giving up on those you love, and the incredible things that can happen when people choose to care about each other's struggles. The story that had begun with 2 8-year-old girls refusing to accept that they were too poor to save their dog had become a testament to the fact that some problems are too big for any one family to solve alone, but no problem is too big for a community that chooses to work together. Max's recovery was just the beginning of something much larger, a ripple effect of kindness and support that continued to spread, helping other families, inspiring other children, and proving that sometimes the most desperate circumstances can lead to the most beautiful outcomes.